Hello again. One Salty Beach here, just checking in with you guys. I wanted to say a big, humongous thank you to everybody who watched the last video, to Hannibal, and to a couple of other folks who were kind enough to share my video, and to everybody who reached out, who gave insight and input in the comments section, because I'm a firm believer that in order for us to understand each other, discussion is going to have to be had. That is the cornerstone of how we integrate within each other's lives. I actually had somebody specifically ask me about the 12 steps and whether or not they could be used by people who do not have addictions. They absolutely can. And you don't necessarily have to go to an AA meeting or an NA meeting to actually utilize them. It is a part of a 12-step program like AA or NA or whatever you may think of, but the whole point with the meetings is a method of accountability. It is a method of support, because we go into these meetings and we talk about the things that we're thinking about, the things that we're doing, the stuff that we hit upon that we're not entirely sure how to wrap our minds around or to get a grasp on, to get advice from other people who may have been through it, or simply just to have people commiserate the feelings and the thought processes that we may be having, to allow us to acknowledge this is not just me and I'm not in this alone. The entire purpose for today's video is going to be giving a breakdown of what the steps are and how they are applied. Mind you, I am not a professional. I am not licensed to give any sort of advice. I am not a master. I am not some sort of higher authority on the 12-step program, because I, like all else who practice it, am an addict. I am not perfect. The whole point behind this program is not to get this entirely right all the time, but to make the attempt to get as close to that as we can and to make the effort. There is a saying in most programs that you hear, it's called progress, not perfection, because we will never be perfect, because as individuals, and especially addicts, we are fallible. So take that and keep that in mind as you're watching this. If I say something that does not line up with your particular recovery group or program, please do not take offense. It is simply from my experience only. Step 1 can be applied to pretty much any sort of life situation, whether it be alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling, eating, you name it. Whatever problem that you have, or it can be used. I am powerless over alcohol personally. So I say, I am powerless over alcohol and that my life has become unmanageable. That is part of the reason why when you go to AA meetings or you see representations of AA meetings in things like movies or shows, you see people say, my name is Heather and I'm an alcoholic. That is us actively practicing step 1. We are acknowledging that we have this illness and that it is detrimental to our lives and has been actively. Those of us that are lucky to get and maintain sobriety, we are simply a single sidestep from program to ending up back active in that illness again. There is another saying that you hear in meetings, in recovery programs, that say meeting makers make it. That's one of the reasons why we actively make sure to attend meetings, because it is a level of accountability. And what it does is it helps us to reinforce the positive behaviors that we have established, because the people around us have established also those positive behaviors. It is one of the reasons that they tell you to change your people, places, and things, because you can't stay around other addicts who are actively using and hope to maintain your sobriety. We are powerless. Step 1, admitting we are powerless over alcohol and that our lives have become unmanageable, is a rather large step for a lot of people. Although you would think it would be the simplest step, because obviously if you have a problem with alcohol, you wouldn't be in AA. Well, what a lot of people don't know is that there are people who land in AA that do struggle with this. And it's not being able to acknowledge that they're an alcoholic. They have trouble with the second part, admitting that their life had become unmanageable. I have met people, and I am one of those people, who would be considered a high-functioning alcoholic. I went to work, I paid my bills, I paid my taxes, my house was maintained, my animals were cared for, everything that needed to be dealt with was dealt with. But when the time came, and all was said and done, I was an alcoholic. And although my environment, to an extent, was under control, the most unmanageable part of my life was me, my emotions, my thoughts, my behaviors. Unmanageability can take on many facets of perspective, and a lot of people don't seem to understand that. They have that particular image in their mind of a man or a woman sleeping under a bridge, drinking alcohol out of a paper bag. You know, that's not always the case. You would be surprised the type of people who are alcoholics. Successful people, people with very good careers, people who own businesses, people who have everything in the world that you could possibly imagine. And a lot of times people have trouble wrapping their mind around that when they discover that someone is an alcoholic, myself included. Because the bottom that everybody talks about, hitting rock bottom, it is different for every single person. It does not have to be homelessness. It does not have to be losing everything. It does not have to entail anything that you choose not for it to. There is a saying that says, I can get off the elevator at any time I want. I don't have to ride it all the way down. I will add to it too that a lot of people have hard times acknowledging the unmanageability of their lives simply because of that control in other areas. I've heard it said that it does not matter the amount of alcohol that you drink. If it causes any sort of complication or problem within your life, there's a distinct possibility that you may be an alcoholic. We have those people out there that we call earth people. Those people that can have alcohol and it not turn into something that it doesn't need to be. You have those people who have a glass of wine with their dinner, or have two or three drinks at a barbecue, and then they go on about their day. Nothing changes. But then you have the sort of people who are wired kind of like me, and that one glass of wine or those 2 or 3 beers at the barbecue changes our behavior. It changes the way that we respond to things, and it causes friction. It causes arguments. It causes fights. It causes behaviors in us that are detrimental. Step 2 is also rather difficult for those of us who are addicts and alcoholics, because we have a tendency to be control freaks. We think that we have everything maintained. We think that we are fooling everybody around us, and we have a tendency to want everybody to respond the way that we think that they should, and that is not the case. With this particular step, I'm sorry, I blanked. Sorry about that. With this particular step, acknowledging that we are not in control despite how badly we want to be is against our ingrained nature. So people do struggle also with this step. But we have no control. By acknowledging this, we are allowing not just ourselves, but those around us in our environment to be more acceptable for us. By saying, restoring us to sanity, our thinking is not rational in comparison to the earth people of the world. Our thought process is not what one would consider average. I heard some years back a gentleman say that without control, an alcoholic feels as though they have nothing, which is absolutely true. But at the same time, as an active addict, we have no control. We don't even have control over ourselves. Step 3 is where a lot of people get hung up, and it actually stops a lot of people from coming into any sort of 12-step program because of the word God. We have atheists and agnostics in 12-step programs, and everyone of every faith is welcome. The word God with the capital G is a representative sort of thing. Now, mind you, back in the day when this program was established, yes, the two men, Bill and Bob, the two of them were Christian, and they acknowledged that God with the capital G was their God. But over time, and with the evolution of spiritual practices within the world as it is, the God with the capital G was more representative of the God of your understanding. When I say that there are atheists and agnostics, I have had people tell me that the group is their representative of God. I have heard somebody say before that the tree that was on the hill, this big beautiful tree up on the hill across from the meeting place where the meetings were held, was their representation of God, which is fine, so long as you can acknowledge that there is something out there of greater power than yourself. It doesn't matter what you utilize. With the change from the classical sense, God with the capital G, to the God of your understanding, it made it possible for all faith bases to step into the recovery sphere within the 12-step program. Right now, there are recovery programs all across the world. Last count, I believe, was 180 countries worldwide. And in 180 different countries, I imagine that they're not all from some sort of Christian-based ideology. So, obviously, your particular method or personalized belief would fit within any 12-step program. The fact is that this program individually, despite the use of the word God with a capital G, it is more spiritual than. Step 4 is usually one that a lot of people are in a hurry to rush to because they don't really feel like they have that much to hide or to cover. But guaranteed, it always ends up being more than you expect it to be. If you have a solid sponsor who is capable of sitting down with you and letting you know, this all needs to come out. It doesn't matter how small, it doesn't matter how big it gets, it all needs to come out. You have to acknowledge everything. What it does for you is it helps you to acknowledge your weaknesses. Whether you have problems with resentments and anger, whether you have unrealistic fears, a large amount of pride, self-will issues, self-pity, whether you're dealing with guilt or shame, whether you have issues with sex or abuse or anything. Realistically, if it has the prospect to contribute negatively to your life, then it does need to be brought in. What this does is it helps you also identify your strengths, how it is that you can utilize the knowledge to help form your process from there forward. It is incredibly stressed throughout this process for step 4 that you do not hold back, that you let everything out, and that it is completely without fear or judgment. Because no one in this program or any 12-step program in general is going to look at you and say, oh my God, I cannot believe you just said that, or I cannot believe you did that. Because we have all done things and said things that we are not proud of. We're also firm believers that in this step it's important to be open and thorough, because secrets are what make us sick. The things that we believe will skew how people view us is part of what is poisoning us. Step 5 is where the rubber really starts to meet the road. We admit to God, our God of our understanding, to another person, and to ourselves the exact nature of all the things that we've done wrong. Now, a lot of people, when they do their step 4 and then transition into their step 5, they cannot actively sometimes see their part in the wrongs that have been done. But everything is a matter of, what part did I play in this? Did I respond badly to this? Did I choose to make this issue? Did I just simply fall into the wrong set of circumstances because of my choice of people, places, and things? It is to help you sort through that and help you figure out where your mistakes originated from and how they affected you and how they established the current chain of behavior which you found yourself on to start with. At the very end, and myself especially, and I can say this full-chested, at the very end of step 5, I felt incredibly unburdened. I felt lighter, because saying all the things that I've kept inside and not said to somebody else, it was incredibly freeing. It is really nice at the end of it to sit down and say, I am who I am. This is me. And this person that I confessed everything to, they're still here. You could almost equate the step 5 process to a sort of confessional like you see in the Catholic faith. But unlike your Catholicism standard, you are not given the 5 Hail Marys and 6 Our Fathers and go forth and prosper. I say this as someone who has grown up in a mixed religious household. My father's family was Catholic and my mother's family was Southern Baptist. Not having any particular foot in either religious lane kind of left me in a place of uncertainty. So having this step 5 actually worked on my behalf to do the sort of thing that a religious actual program or faith could not do. Step 6 prayer is incredibly personal for a lot of people, mainly because it is establishing that connection more thoroughly with their higher power. Mind you, a lot of times it is something as simple as, Lord, I need you to help me to correct the things that are wrong within me. The versions that I've heard are very beautiful. There is one, and I've pulled it up here so I can read it to you guys. Dear God, I am ready for your help in removing from me the defects of character within myself, which I now realize are an obstacle to my recovery and to the life that you have laid out before me. Please help me to continue to be honest with myself, with others, and to guide me towards spiritual and mental health. It has been laid out in many, many textbooks that addiction of any sort is a mental health disorder. We can see this, we can acknowledge this, and I've actually heard it said, excuse me, that the brains of alcoholics are sort of wired differently. The actual representation of that is this. The average Earth person's brain is the equivalent of a room like I'm sitting in now. And in each room, there are plugs, there are power outlets. With the average earthling brain, you can plug something in and everything is fine. With an alcoholic, the way that our brains and our room, as it were, is wired that makes us different is you're sitting in the same room. The difference is those outlets are screaming at you, plug something in, plug something in, plug something in, plug something in, plug something in. And the only time that it doesn't do that is in the moment that you insert the plug. The problem is that even after the plug is there, you will still continue to hear plug something in, plug something in, plug something in, because there is no actual connection between that plug and that outlet. That may be a bad analogy, but to me that resonated. I don't know if it will for anybody out there, but for me it made perfect sense. Step 7 is the equivalent of a 6.2. We humbly ask the Lord, of the God of our understanding, to remove our shortcomings and to make it easier for us to walk through this path ahead of us without our shortcomings and our setbacks being something that would derail. Step 8, we are sitting down and we are actively saying, okay, these are the people who I have done wrong in some way, which is actually an offshoot from step 4. By doing step 4, we can actively see where we have fallen short, where the things that we have done have missed the mark, or we have completely gone off in left field and created all kind of chaos and havoc. By making this list of people we need to go back and make amends to, there is tangibility to that. As a part of step 8, we remain willing to make amends to these people as it presents. 9, we make those amends as they present themselves for the most part. You do have people that you do have to seek out. There have been opportunities where certain people who have cut all contact with me over things that I have said or done in the past, I wrote them a letter and sent it to them in the mail. Mind you, there is a caveat to this. If something you tell them in the process of making amends could possibly hurt them or somebody else in the process, you do not do that. Because that is that other person's cross to bear. An example of that would be if I broke into somebody's house and stole a bunch of their stuff with my best friend, and by making amends, I came to them and said, hey, me and my best friend, we broke into your house and we stole all your stuff. I can make amends for my actions. However, I cannot implicate the other person because that is their individual cross to bear. And by outing this other person, that would be compromising them and could cause them undue injury in the process. That may actually not be the best example, but that is the first one that I have come to my mind. It would be the same way with infidelity. If you slept with another person's spouse and you wanted to apologize to the person that you have wronged, it would be impossible to do so without affecting the other person involved. Unfortunately, as a part of our shortcomings, of trying to stray away from our shortcomings, the whole point is to not cause collateral damage to people around us. There are instances where I have heard of people who have had to make steps for amends for people who are no longer here because they are deceased, and other sorts of things. A lot of times conversations I've heard have been had at graves. I have heard of people writing letters to the person that they have lost or cannot have contact with for whatever reason, and then taking it somewhere and letting it go. I've heard of people simply going to where they saw the person last and having an open conversation just in general, with no other person there, willing it out into the universe, hoping that it will find the person that they are meaning to address it to. So it is entirely possible. Then you have those sorts of circumstances like me, where you cannot actively make amends to somebody because you have done so much harm over the years, cumulatively, that no one single amend is going to fix the relationship there or the damage that's been done. An example for me would be my family. I have told them I'm sorry so many times I had told them so many times over the years that I was sorry, and I'm sorry doesn't mean anything anymore. That's an unfortunate side effect of the damage we do collaterally as addicts and alcoholics when we are actively using. Saying I'm sorry does not fix it. Then you have what is called living amends. You live your redemption, your corrective action, and your amends to the people around you by not using, by correcting your behavior, by exhibiting healthier habits, thought processes, behaviors to them and to everyone else. So ideally, a lot of things that kind of get overlooked too, which I've noticed, and I started including into my program sponsorship with others, is that we include ourselves in our amends. Because even though we don't really consider it as such, we do ourselves a lot of damage in the process. And we owe ourselves living amends too. Because without the damage that we've done, our lives could have been drastically different and possibly better. Step 10 is an everyday behavior. We continue to take personal inventory, and when we are wrong, we promptly admit it. That is a day in, day out sort of behavior. Mind you, a lot of people have their own individual practice on that, whether they do it in the moment or they've taken some time and thought about things that have just happened and corrected them, or they sit down at the end of the day and they write out everything that's happened for the day. It doesn't matter. As soon as you are capable of seeing that where you are wrong in your response or your actions in a particular situation, the sooner you can go back and correct it. And it is absolutely necessary in order to maintain that particular level of personal accountability. Now, you do have those people who will regularly go through and do another fourth and fifth step, which is fine. It's actually pretty advisable for people, because there may be things sometimes that you may correct in the moment that are not entirely 100% resolved. So a fourth and fifth step later on, further down the line, may be necessary to help you go back and resort through everything to ensure that most of what you've gone through has been dealt with and handled and unloaded. Step 11 is probably the hardest one for me. We seek through prayer and meditation. Prayer I have absolutely no problem with. Meditation has always been the caveat for me, because I have trouble quieting my mind by stopping and simply settling and just being. So for me, prayer becomes a representation of meditation. It is simply me saying the things from within my heart and my soul that I need the God of my understanding to hear. And in relation, instead of quieting myself and quieting my mind and actually meditating, because I have a tendency to fall asleep whenever I try to meditate, I remained open and conscious of possible response. You hear a lot of people say, "Lord, tell me what I need to do." A lot of times, the good Lord is going to tell you what you need to see and what you need to hear in order to move forward. You just have to be open and receptive to it. And that is what step 11 is all about. And it says in there, praying for His knowledge, for His will for us, and the power to carry that out. By having Him show us what our next steps could and should be, we are remaining receptive. With step 12, it is a service based sort of thing. You hear it a lot where, especially in meetings, the newest person is the most important person in the room. The active addict or alcoholic is the most important person there for multiple reasons. As addicts and alcoholics, we keep what we give, as in our recovery, by giving it to others. We give them the guidance, we give them the perspective, because they are not clear from that fog that tends to cloud the spirit and the mind of someone who is still actively using. So we give what we have, that clarity, that foresight, that outside perspective that they would be lacking. Sorry. We also do that by giving away our time, our energy, our focus. As an example, with the last recovery group that I was in before I moved, I'm in a completely new one now. The previous group that I was in was my home group. I had been with them for the duration of my recovery. And probably about 8 months before I moved, I was sitting around talking to some people and said, there are not enough things for us to do as sober people that don't involve places where alcohol could be involved. And for people who are newer in recovery, that's really not something that they should have to worry about. So I established a sober movie night. I purchased a projector and the projector screen and everything, and established a movie night at our building where we hold our meetings, and would show various movies that could relate to program or may not relate to program at all. But we all would get together, we would eat, we would talk, we would watch the movie, and just hang out. And by doing that, there were a lot of people who were brand new in recovery that said to me, I'm glad you did this, because, otherwise I would have been sitting at home by myself and I didn't really want to be alone. So by doing that and helping this person, I'm helping myself too, because I understood those feelings. I've been there. And just how scary it can be to be by yourself when you're brand new in recovery and not having someone to spend your time with or something to do that doesn't involve being around the people that you used to drink or use with. Because especially early in, it can be very precarious. Part of that 12-step program is to go forward, let me find it, and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. I'm sorry, once upon a time I did have all of these steps memorized, but over time I have kind of lost little bits and pieces of them. The fact is that I can keep in mind the actual individual steps and what they entail, but not the actual verbiage. So, practicing these principles in all of our affairs, believe it or not, each individual step of the 12 carries with it their own principle. You have acceptance at step 1, hope in step 2, faith in step 3, courage in step 4, honesty step 5, patience step 6, humility in step 8, willingness step 9, brotherly love step 10, integrity 11, self-discipline and service in step 12. When it says we go forward when we practice these principles in all of our affairs, that is exactly what this means. Taking each one of these actions that we are carrying out through this 12-step process, and we are ingraining them as a part of who we are and how we function in day-to-day life. And carrying them out ensures that we will continue to work that program and to institute them daily, which is important to us. Otherwise, we end up on that slippery slope of behaviors which can cause a backslide. And that's not where any of us wants to be. And that's not what any of us wants for anybody else in any recovery program. Ideally, of course, a lot of these steps could be done by ourselves. But again, through the service portion and the step 12 of the program, we are best led down a path that others have already gone down. For somebody that is in need of any sort of help in any area of our lives, we are not meant to shoulder that burden completely on our own. By having someone there to help guide you, to give you that encouragement, it actually goes a long way. Now, for me, my very first sponsor was a 65-year-old man, had been sober for 30 years, very, very sweet man. I looked at him like a grandparent. But the difference is, with someone like him, who had been around a long time, he was what is considered an old timer. He had been sober since the 60s, okay? And he was no nonsense. He had a great sense of humor, but he didn't play. That is exactly what I needed in that moment. I needed somebody to call me on my bull, okay? So whomever you get to work through these steps with you, whether it be someone who is exactly like you or has nothing even remotely correlative to the type of experience you've had, it doesn't really matter. It just depends on what you're looking for in a sponsor or someone to help navigate you through these steps. The recommendation is to find yourself someone who has the things in their recovery or in their life that you are seeking out. And this gentleman, who has long since passed, rest his soul, he was very successful. He had a great relationship with his family. He was a very knowledgeable person, and that is what I wanted. I wanted the positive traits from his life that he was capable of attaining through the work that he had done. So it is entirely personal for you. Every recovery every recovery journey is individual to the person. So who you seek out to guide you through it can also be too. I don't know if this particular video has been of any help to anybody, but I'm kind of hoping that it gives a little bit of insight so that you guys understand a little bit better, what's involved in the 12-step programs for recovery. I don't know if anybody out there has anything else to throw in on the 12-step program itself or any of the individual steps themselves that may shed some further light on them. But I am completely open to that. I am more than willing to take any input on that because, again, I am not a master of this. I have not perfected it. I am simply living my life as close to performing these steps as I can attain, because life happens and there is nothing that we can do to prevent things from coming up in our path that may test those steps and that resolve. So I hope this has been insightful. Thank you all so much for coming by. I appreciate it. You guys have a wonderful day.